One of 2 days of services to remember Ace Frehley. We are bringing you pre-recorded shows today and tomorrow, as today I am preparing to attend the first service for Ace, and tomorrow the funeral. So with that in mind, you've got pre-recorded shows. Now, the show I'm about to bring to you today, I did pre-record, and this was done a few days, if I'm being honest, before Ace passed away, because I had been tipped off to the fact that Ace was not doing well and likely was not going to make it. Sadly, that ended up being the case. So this show was up on the podcast, but never aired in our usual 3 to 5 Eastern window here during the week. So I'm going to bring this to you right now. This is really just 2 hours stream of consciousness, thoughts, memories, and stories personally from me about my 40-year friendship with Ace. And, it was incredibly tough to do. And even with the 2 hours that you're about to hear, I could have gone on for hours longer. There are a million stories that are not in these 2 hours. That's how much experience and fun and different varied things that I've done with them. Even since I did this, I've had people reach out to me and remind me of events that we did. And I found photos of things that we did that I completely forgot about. So to say that I will be speaking and telling stories about Ace for years to come is certainly an understatement, because there are countless ones. But here on the Best of Trunk Nation today, not really a best of, this never really aired in this window. Here are my thoughts and my memories and my tribute to Ace Frehley. Anybody that knows me or anything about me knows how much Kiss has meant to me my pretty much entire life, and what Ace has meant to me, both as a fan and as a friend. You could make the case that of all the musicians that I have had the opportunity to know, to have dealt with, to have worked with in my entire life, Ace would probably be the guy that I have the closest relationship and the longest history with. He is a guy that I know on 2 different levels. I know as a fan before I knew him personally, as a kid being a huge Kiss fan. And of course, since 1986, have known on the professional level and have worked with from time to time. And a guy that was the first artist I ever signed to a record label when I started at Megaforce Records at 22 in 1986. This is, devastating news to the entire rock community, and to me personally on many levels. And you are seeing that outpouring of love and shock and sadness around the world because of Ace's passing. Ace was, and I'm going to talk about Ace today, and I'm going to spend this show remembering my friend and sharing some stories and observations, and time permitting, I may even do, top 10 Ace songs, at some point in the show today. In full disclosure, this show was pre-recorded and had to be because of my schedule. But we will have plenty of time for you to remember Ace and for you guys to call in. I promise that. This is going to be ongoing for a while. Similar to when we lost Ozzy recently, similar to when we lost Eddie Van Halen, it is certainly of that magnitude. It is the first member of the original lineup of Kiss to pass away. Ace was the youngest at 74 years old. And, the circumstances around What happened will come out over time. There is nothing that is nefarious in any way. This was sadly purely an accident. You know that Ace fell once, resulting in him canceling some shows that weekend. After that happened, I was in touch with Ace and contacted him, and he got back to me and said he was fine and that he would be back up on his feet in a couple of days, just needed to take some time off. So I was very relieved to have heard from him. And he assured me that he was okay. But what happened between now and then, there was apparently I believe he injured himself again and fell accidentally. And again, those details will come out. And he suffered serious damage from a very serious fall. There was no stroke, as had been reported. This is purely from injuries sustained in a fall. And, you know, I can't help but to think about the irony that Ace himself would be cackling about right now. That a man who took the persona of a person from outer space, when the original 4 members picked their personas and designed their makeup, that Ace said he was going to be the spaceman. And of course, you know, the narrative was that Ace had trouble with the gravity on Earth and it couldn't hold him down. The line in Shock Me. The gravity that used to hold me down just don't exist anymore. The irony of the fact that he was always goofed on throughout his life in a fun way because of his inability to always stand straight up and kind of stumble around and shuffle his feet the way he walked. The irony that I worked on a record with him called Trouble Walkin', with a song on it called Trouble Walkin', with a chorus sung by him, I have trouble walking. That he would pass away from trouble walking is beyond crazy. And I only bring this up because I knew Ace so well, and the irony of that would not escape him without a cackle, I'm sure. And that cackle is something we will all miss. Because, man, was it a cackle. And one of a kind. So, you know, look, I am just working off the fly here. I am clearly struggling here, and I am just going to give you a flow of what comes into my brain over these next 2 hours to try to do the right thing by my friend and remember my friend and celebrate my friend and share some stories and share some insights. And it's the best I can do right now. But we will do way, way more with you as we go forward. No question about it. But, you know, I'd like to talk about Ace on 2 different levels. The level where I knew him personally and our involvement and friendship, but also before that, the level of me as a fan. Because first and foremost, all I ever professed to be was a fan. Still to this day, I just consider myself a fan. And Ace was, and Kiss was, like so many of my age, the most important band imaginable. And when I discovered Kiss at around 12, 13 years old, walking home from junior high school. Changed my life. And Ace was a big part of that. You know, who is this guy from outer space? Who is this guy that plays a guitar that smokes and looks like it's on fire and lights up? Who is this, crazy guy with this cackling voice sometimes, with this crazy laugh? Who is this guy that makes his guitar fly up into the rafters? Or blows it up? But most importantly, for me and many others, who is this guy that is playing these brilliant guitar solos? Because for me, yes, all the trappings that came with Kiss, all the showmanship and costumes and makeup and stage designs and things blowing up, all great. But to me, it was the icing on the cake of great songs. And at the center of so many of those great songs were absolutely perfect, brilliant guitar solos that I often said were songs within the song. If you really know Kiss, you know what I'm talking about. As a kid, when I would get a Kiss record, and many others would, you waited for that lead guitar break. You waited for that moment. What is Ace going to do here? What is he going to play? What style? What's it going to be? Is it going to be ripping? Is it going to be that staccato? Is it going to be flicking that volume switch? Is it going to be holding a note? What is he going to do? Is it going to be 3 seconds, 30 seconds? Whatever it was, it always fit perfectly within the song. And it was always signature Ace. One of those guitar players that when you heard it, you knew it was him. And anyone who knows guitar knows that. Now, when you talk about Ace from a guitar playing standpoint, he would have been the first to tell you, and he did say many times, that he was never the best technically proficient guitar player. He was never this guy with some sort of blazing speed or technique. He was self-taught. He had a great quote once that said, if I would have known I was going to influence so many guitar players, I would have practiced more. And it was a ideal example of quality over quantity, meaning that what he chose to play and how he structured his solos were songs within the song. They were perfect for the song. They never overdid it, underdid it. I mean, I can't think of many guitar players whose solos in the iconic material, which in this case, I'm talking predominantly about Kiss in the 70s, that just said so much. It was almost like you looked forward to the song and the verse and the chorus, and you couldn't wait to hear what the guitar solo was going to be. And to me, that is, and I'm not, as I often tell you guys, I'm not a musician, but I know what I like and I know what moves me and I know what connects to my hearing and my ears. And my gosh, I mean, what he did, even as a kid, I was like, this is something different. This is extremely cool. This is like, what is going on here? You would hum those solos. And the influence of Ace Frehley on legions of guitar players. I mean, you are seeing it with the outcry from every musician, people just devastated by this, who didn't even know him because of the mark he made on them. Whether you're a Kiss fan or not, the original 4 members of Kiss, what they did, what they accomplished, how they changed the world, how they changed the landscape of rock music, the mark that was made on so many people is enormous. And Ace is a huge part of that on so many levels. I mean, Dimebag Darrell, rest his soul, had Ace tattooed on his chest. When I went to see Motley Crue recently, and I walked into John Five's dressing room, what's the first thing up on his wall? Posters of Ace. What do you think we talked about for the hour I was in his dressing room? For at least 3/4 of the time, Ace and Kiss. So it is a enormous legacy of influence. Obviously synonymous with his Les Paul guitar, synonymous with the stage performance, synonymous with the sound of that guitar and what he played. So the impact is beyond belief. You could, and I'm not just saying this because of how close I was with Ace. I'm saying this because it's true. He is completely different kinds of guitar players, of course, but the influence and impact and amount of people who picked up a guitar because of Ace Frehley is on par with some of the biggest guitar players in the world. And I'm talking the Van Halens of the world, the Jimmy Pages of the world. It's that big. I'm not saying he was the same kind of guitar player. This isn't about who was better. That statement is about the people who inspired people to play the instrument because of how they connected to that person. And Ace is right up there, and certainly the top echelon. I first saw Kiss as my first ever concert, December 16th, 1977. 13 years old, Madison Square Garden. And again, my life was changed. My life and my first couple years of being a rock fan as a little kid, it was nothing but Kiss. There was nothing else that mattered but Kiss. Couldn't begin to tell you how many times I put the albums on my turntable, closed the door, and busted out the air guitar, alternating between the Paul Stanley power chords and the Ace guitar solos, thinking I knew exactly what I was doing on that air guitar instrument, thinking I was Ace. So you could talk about the influence, the music, the impact forever. And it will go on forever. And, as we continue to get new discoveries of old Kiss video and old Kiss recordings, it'll just continue to get magnified, no doubt. So I can't, speak more about the impact that Ace had on me as a kid before I knew him. And of course, Kiss in general. But it was a real game changer to me when I found myself 9 years after seeing Kiss for the first time live in 1977. 9 years later, meeting him in a professional capacity. As most people know, or maybe don't know, Ace's first solo album after leaving Kiss, I signed him to that record deal. And that was the beginning of our relationship and the beginning of our friendship. So I'm going to take a quick break here. And when I come back, I've got stories for days. Every time I would meet people over my career, they'd tell me an Ace story. Tell me an Ace story. And, they'd love when I would do an impression of Ace, which I got down pretty good after, speaking with them for 4 decades, both on and off the air. And my God, the amount of on-air moments and crazy on-air moments that I've had on my radio shows and TV shows over the years. I mean, I'm literally jotting down notes as more come into my mind. The amount of iconic, hysterical, downright crazy moments are endless for me personally, and obviously beyond for many others as well. So I'm going to do my best to remember and eulogize Ace. Again, man, a show that every time we lose an iconic artist, I always say it's a show I wish I wasn't doing, but this one is as high on that list as you could possibly imagine, because this one hits at a whole different level for me. So I'm going to do my best here today for Ace and share some moments and stories and maybe some things you didn't know along the way. Well, let me get a quick break in here.
O'Brien, and guess what? I've got my own channel, Conan O'Brien Radio, here on Sirius XM. Tune in to channel 104 for exclusive interviews with your favorite celebrities, hilarious moments from all my TV shows, showcasing some of the most absurd and hilarious moments from my decades on television, and episodes from Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend podcast and Andy Richter's weekly call-in show. Don't miss out. Conan O'Brien Radio, channel 104, or anytime on the Sirius XM app.
Kenny Chesney's journey took him from a small town in East Tennessee to country music superstardom and everywhere in between.
Oh, hello, how are you tonight?
To mark the arrival of his first ever book,
I've been writing Heart Life Music.
he'll share stories with a small group of superfans.
It's my story, how we got here.
Kenny Chesney, live from Nashville, today at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific,
On No Shoes Radio.
Channel 59, and Y2 Country, Channel 57.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment.
Visit mintmobile.com/radio.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra.
Special edition of... So I could talk to you guys forever about what Kiss and Ace meant to me and still do. But I want to change gears and talk to you about, me knowing the man, some of our experiences and some of the stories revolving around that. I started seeing Ace after he left Kiss play in local venues around the New York, New Jersey area. Of course, everybody knows Ace was born in the Bronx, very much a New York City guy. Even though throughout his life he lived in many places, from Southern California to obviously New York. I believe he had a place in Florida at one point. And at the time of his death and where he took the fall was his home in New Jersey, which is only about a half an hour from my home. And I had visited recently to do an interview with him for my documentary, which is still yet to come. But I first got to know Ace because I had started seeing him play clubs and theaters around New Jersey. He played the legendary rock club L'Amour in Brooklyn back in the day, started to put a band together, Frehley's Comet, and started to do some gigs in the New York tri-state area. And me and many other Kiss fans were very excited about this, and we would go to these shows, and the shows would often be packed. There was a great vibe in there. There's a great, real, raw rock and roll vibe in those shows, man. I'll tell you that. And flash forward to 1986. You know, I'm just a couple years out of high school. I would have been 22. So 2-3 years out of high school. And I had used to go to a flea market in New Jersey and buy records from a guy named Johnny Z. He had a store called Rock and Roll Heaven. And, you know, there's a long story there with Metallica and Johnny eventually hiring me because I played Metallica. I started in radio in 83, and it was unique what I was doing. And you know that story probably. So that led to me getting a job with the label Megaforce, which was known for being the label that introduced the world to Metallica. And I started working for John at that label, out of his house in Old Bridge, New Jersey. And John, at that time, was, you know, way more wired into heavy metal. You know, the bands on the label at the time were Manowar and Raven and Anthrax and Overkill and way heavier, more intense stuff, which I was all good with. But I felt strongly that for us to take next steps as a label, as a viable label, I felt strongly that we should get an artist that appealed to hard rock and metal, but could get radio play. And that could maybe advance the label and actually, you know, get on the air and get on MTV and sell a lot of records. And Johnny Z was not a Kiss fan. Johnny Z sadly passed away a few years ago. He was not a Kiss fan. But he said to me when I told him that I'd like to work with an artist and have an artist that was kind of mine, that I brought into the company, and that could maybe get some radio, because he knew me as a radio guy, because even at that point in 86, I had been in radio for 3 years, and I was doing one of the few metal shows anywhere in the world. So he kind of deferred to me when I talked about radio and what could work on radio. And he said to me, "What are you thinking?" And I said, "Well, I think a perfect signing for us would be Ace Frehley." And again, him not being a Kiss fan, he didn't really get it. He goes, "Well, why do you think that could work?" I said, "Well, there's a big audience out there." Now, remember, 86, Kiss was doing okay with the non-makeup lineup, but they were still thought of as kind of older, damaged goods. But Ace was like, John was like, "Why do you think that'll work?" I said, "They're going to connect with the metal fans. He'll connect with the rock fans. I've seen him in these club shows. He's really good." And remember, Ace had a hit unexpectedly 8 years earlier with New York Groove. Shockingly, when Kiss did the 4 solo albums in 78, as we all know, Ace's is widely considered to be the best. And it was the only one that had a hit with New York Groove. So I threw all this out to John, and he was intrigued. But he said to me, "Look, you're going to have to take the lead on this, because I don't know anything about this scene, and I was never into Kiss, and I don't really know much about this, but I'd take a meeting if you can track him down." So we ended up, believe it or not, at that time, nobody would touch Ace. Everyone was afraid of him. He was viewed as a liability. He was viewed as way too erratic, way too unstable. Drugs, alcohol, not trustworthy, not somebody that could ever do anything again. So that's why none of the major labels had any interest in him. That's why he couldn't get a record deal. But, you know, I thought it was very much in the spirit of Megaforce as a company, which always thought outside the box, and it basically introduced thrash metal, you know, along with Metal Blade, of course, to the world. I thought that it was kind of on brand for us. So John said, look, go for it. If you can put something together, get a meeting, I'll sit and hear what he's doing and hear it out. And I had already known some of the songs he was doing because he was playing them live in these clubs. So we ended up tracking Ace down through the producer, Eddie Kramer, who, of course, Ace always had a close working relationship. And Eddie produced some of the biggest Kiss records and the 2 classic live records, and had also produced Ace's 78 solo record. And I think we got to Eddie because Eddie was interested in producing Anthrax, or Anthrax was interested in having Eddie produce them. And he ultimately did because he produced Among the Living. But we managed to get in touch with Eddie. And Johnny said to Eddie Kramer, you know, what are you working with Ace? Do you have a contact for Ace Frehley? He said, you know, I got a guy in my office that's a big fan. He thinks it would be worthwhile hearing demos and signing them. And Eddie Kramer said, as a matter of fact, I do have some demos. And yeah, I am in touch with Ace, and he's been really good lately, and he's been sober and together lately. So Eddie Kramer sent in a cassette. I don't remember the songs. There were probably 4 or 5 songs on it as a demo. And Johnny and I sat in his office and we listened to it. And I had already known the songs because I had heard them live. And John liked the idea. And remember, this was not, you know, Kiss was not how Kiss is looked at now. Kiss was looked at as an old band in 1986 whose best days were behind them, who were out there making, you know, the dreaded hair metal on MTV and all of that with a different lineup. Doing okay. By 86, they were doing okay. But it was not what Kiss is and viewed as now. So we got a meeting. And it was in New York City. It was in a hotel. I forget where. Which exact hotel it was, probably somewhere near Columbus Circle. And we ended up, John and I drove in from New Jersey for a lunch meeting. The other 2 people at the meeting were Ace and Eddie Kramer. And I'm sorry, I take that back. And there was a third person. It was Bill Aucoin, the legendary manager of Kiss. And Bill was, at the time, going to manage, he was no longer managing Kiss. He was going to manage Ace's solo career if we signed him. So you can imagine, for me, as a crazy Kiss fan, 22 years old, I'm at a lunch with the manager, architect of Kiss in Bill Aucoin, the legendary producer, Eddie Kramer, and an original member of Kiss who I'm meeting with in an attempt to talk into signing to an independent record label that I just started working at. And I didn't have any previous label experience. And I've always been good about keeping the my exterior cool, even in the inside. If I'm going, this is friggin' insane. And I remember that lunch really tested me on that regard, because I just was like, inside, I'm like, this is surreal. This is just nuts. This is not happening. The only thing I really remember clearly about that lunch, because again, it's almost 4 decades ago, was what Ace ordered. He ordered a tuna sandwich. That was his go-to. Remember, he ordered tuna, maybe it was on rye, I don't remember. Tuna sandwich and a Coke or something. So we, for us, for John and I, that meeting was really more about feeling Ace out and seeing if he was stable and normal and functional and sober. Because you also have to remember, at that time, Ace was in the news a lot, and not for the right reasons. He smashed up a DeLorean. He drove his car on the Southern State Parkway or something against the wrong traffic coming at him the wrong way. Issues with drugs, issues with alcohol, reliability. And we were like, can we get anything out of this guy? Is he going to make us miserable? Is he going to be nothing but drama? Nobody wants to deal with that. But at the lunch, Ace was great, personable, funny, coherent, sharp. And Eddie Kramer completely endorsed it and said, yeah, this is, he's good. He's good to go. We can make a great record. So we left the lunch. We began some dialogue about terms of the deal and money and length of the deal. That stuff, because Johnny owned the label, that was more him and the label's lawyer. So I was not really part of the negotiations of the deal. It's just coming to me now. It's just coming to me now that back then it was common that if somebody signed an artist to a label, which is known as the A&R person, that they would get percentage points on the sales of the record. And it's just hitting me now that when we ultimately ended up signing Ace, John gave me 2 points on the record. He said to me, you know what? This was a great call. I think this is going to do well. And you get 2 points. And I remember as that record came out and started selling, wondering where that money was in my check. Because I was a kid. I wasn't making much money at all. I had the big title, but I didn't have the big paycheck. And I remember Johnny always telling me, he's like, well, Ed, there's something called recoup. You got to recoup. Until we make our money back, you don't see any money. Needless to say, to this day, I've never seen a penny of residuals from my work with Ace Frehley from John and Megaforce, but it's all right. But because it was a verbal thing, I don't think it was ever in print, but still. That just hit me, man. Because I would always be like, hey, Johnny, did we recoup? No, we're not close to recoup. We could have been recouped 10 times over. He wasn't going to tell me. Don't worry about that. I'll let you know. As he started taking limos to the supermarket. It's a whole nother story. But what did I care, man? I'm working with one of my heroes. I'm a few years out of high school. I'm working at a record label, even though we were working out of John's house in Old Bridge, New Jersey. And I'm working with a hero, a musical hero. And, initially, Ace and I had back then would have some conversations here and there. But the record was really made by Ace and Eddie Kramer. Because obviously Eddie Kramer and Ace had this huge history. and, huge working relationship. So we just let them run with it. And they started sending in tracks as they were recording them. And they were all great. We loved what we were hearing. We were getting super stoked. And we were going to put out the first Frehley's Comet album. And there were a couple songs I remember we got that were supposed to be on the record that weren't. There's a great song called Give It To Me Anyway that Richie Scarlett sang that didn't make the record. There was another one, was it We Got Your Rock, I think it was called. I don't remember. We couldn't find the co-writer on that and do the publishing, so we had to leave that off the record. But great record came together, that first Frehley's Comet record. And around it was a great band. Ace insisted on using Anton Fig on drums, who was always his go-to guy. He had John Regan, rest in peace, John, already in the band. And he had Richie Scarlett in the band, who's a great guitar player, singer, and was Ace's right-hand guy. Looked cool. So the thing was great. It was ready to go. Songs were great and everything. And then Ace made the decision, and I don't remember all the circumstances around this, that he didn't want to have Richie a part of the record and part of the band, Frehley's Comet. And I never really fully understood why, but I believe it had something to do with the fact that Ace was very, very concerned about staying sober. There was a lot of pressure on him to stay sober. And I think Richie was somewhat viewed as a partier at that time. And Ace thought that it would tempt him to, fall off the wagon or what have you. So, it's Ace's band, whatever he wants to do. So he had said, I want to, we've got to start auditioning people for second guitar, lead vocal. So he asked me if I had suggestions. He asked guys in his band if he had suggestions. And I was not happy that Richie didn't stay. But again, I was a kid. What could I do? I'm not going to tell Ace Frehley who's got to be in his band. But I had suggested to Ace, I was a fan of a band called 707. And I suggested to Ace that there was a guy that had a great voice, a very high voice, and played keys and played guitar and looked good and could be a great guy in that spot. And that guy was a guy named Todd Howarth. Unbeknownst to me, John Regan, who was very much a big part of this as well, and again, sadly passed away not long ago, John also knew Todd because Todd had played offstage keyboards for Cheap Trick for a little while. And John used to play bass with Peter Frampton, and they toured together, so they got to know each other. So John and I were recommending the same guy. So Ace said, yeah, let's try him out. Bring him in. Todd lived in San Diego. I think he still does. So they auditioned Todd. Todd ended up getting the gig. Todd contributed to the first record. He sings the song Breakout on that record. He had the song Something Moved. He sings that on that record. And he worked great. Fit great. So then the record is done, and it's about to come out under the name Frehley's Comet. And then Atlantic Records, who was our distributor, said, hold on. We want to call the record Ace Frehley. And we're like, well, it's kind of a band. The other guys are going to get tweaked. He said, we don't care. We need to sell a record. The first post-Kiss solo record from an original member of the band. We want to put our first best foot forward and make sure people know who it is. They may not know what Frehley's Comet is nationally or globally, but if they see Ace Frehley, they'll know exactly who it is. And we couldn't argue with that marketing. It's kind of similar to what happened with Ozzy Osbourne with the first album being called Blizzard of Oz. Blizzard of Oz was supposed to be the name of the band. Then at the last minute, CBS Records says, no, we need the guy's name from Black Sabbath at the top. So the name of the record became Blizzard of Oz, and it became branded a solo thing. Very, very similar set of circumstances. So then, the name of the record becomes Frehley's Comet. Ace Frehley's name goes to the top. And the record came out and did very well. The first single was a song called Into the Night that was written by Russ Ballard. We did that because Russ Ballard also wrote New York Groove, which was obviously a huge, huge hit, still is. And we said maybe we could get lightning to strike twice. Ace doing a different Russ Ballard song, and it was a great song. Now, I didn't think it should have been the lead single because it was more mid-tempo, and I thought we should have come out with something a little more blazing hard rock. But Atlantic and everyone loved that as the lead single, thought it had the most crossover commercial appeal. And at the end of the day, we were really trying to take Megaforce and Ace to another level, and we thought we could get radio play because he had gotten it before with New York Groove. So the video for Into the Night was shot, if I recall, in the San Francisco Bay Area. Came out, got some MTV love, got some radio love, did well, set the table for what we thought would be a great career and a great run with the record. Remember, back in those days, when you put out a new record, you'd go 3-4 singles deep and you'd work the record for a year. It's not like it is now. 5 singles before the record comes out. After the first week, people forgot the record came out. Completely different marketing back then. It was about setting it up and the long haul. The song that everybody thought should have been the first single, or some did, and that led the record was Rock Soldiers. I'll never forget Gene Simmons calling the office because Gene and Paul were keeping tabs on Ace. This was the first guy to really do a big record and a big moment coming out of their band. And they were curious if he was going to hold up and not implode like many were. And I remember Gene calling Johnny and being like, record's good, but you guys blew it. Rock Soldiers should have come first. He was probably right. I often wonder if Rock Soldiers would have been the first single and Into the Night was the second, if it would have changed things. Who knows? And needless to say, we did Rock Soldiers second. Did a video for that. I believe that was shot in Canada. And did okay. And got the record to just shy of gold, which at that time for all of us, it would have been a huge accomplishment. And for Ace to have a gold record with his first solo album outside of Kiss. And we got very, very close to gold, but then the record stalled. We even did this campaign called Race for Ace to try to get it to gold. And then the record stalled and we just folded the whole thing. And, to this day, it would be very, very rewarding for me to have a gold record for that album on my wall. And I'm sure that the record is past half 500,000 by now easily, but it's just never been recertified. And I just don't know how to go about that. So, that was the first album. He went out and did a lot of touring. It was just fun. I went on the road with him. We got to know each other better. He got to know me. I got to know him. And we had some great times together. I'll never forget one of those times we were in Dallas and there was a venue, if I recall there, called the Bronco Bowl. The bill was Ace Frehley, Y&T, who had the Contagious record out. And in the third slot was either Faster Pussycat or Gary Moore. It kind of switched around. But I remember flying out to some shows, and I remember Yeah, I was a huge Y&T fan. I was a huge Gary Moore fan. I definitely remember Gary was on that show. And I remember Ace played the show, headlined, closed the show, and the show ends. And Ace and I, Ace was drinking at that point, not to excess, not to fall down excess, but at that point, after everything that Ace had done, having a few drinks was the least of our worries. So I remember the show ending and Ace saying to me, "Hey, let's walk back to the hotel." It was like somewhere in downtown Dallas. And I said, "All right, if you're cool with that, sure." He goes, "Yeah, maybe we'll stop. We'll have a drink along the way." I said, "Okay." And we were walking back to the hotel. It's about an hour or so after the show. And you know how in certain cities there will be post shows at clubs, like if a band's playing at the theater or the arena, shows out at 11, it'll be like, "Come to Jimmy's Bar and there's a tribute band playing and, have a drink special with your concert ticket stub," that sort of thing. So there was a thing like that going on at a bar on our route to the hotel, which we didn't even know about. And I remember stopping and looking and I heard a band playing Kiss songs. And I saw a sign in the front of the bar and it said, "Tonight, Kiss tribute, free entry with your Ace Frehley ticket stub." So I stop Ace. I go, "How about we go in here and get a drink?" And he looks at me and goes, "Oh, come on, I'm burnt. I can't go in there." I go, "Ace, you blow people's minds if you walk in there with a tribute band playing." I said, "You should even just go in and go up and walk up in the middle of the guy playing you and do the solo. Take the guitar out of his hands." And that idea kind of appealed to him. He kind of lit up. Never forget the look in his face. And he's kind of like, knew that would blow some minds. And he nods his head. He goes, "Let's do it." So we go in and we went in the back and we stood in the back by the bar, completely anonymous. Nobody picked him out. We had a beer and we watched like 2 songs. The Kiss tributes on stage. We watched like 2 songs. And I remember the guy in the tribute band did the "Shock Me" bit where he's like, "We're going to turn the microphone over to Ace Frehley." And I looked at him. I go, "Oh, dude, now's your moment." I said, "Just go walk up there." I said, the look on their faces will be priceless. I said, "Just go walk up there right in the middle of the guy singing 'Shock Me' and tap him on the shoulder or something." He got a couple beers in him, and it's exactly what he did. And these guys, I have no idea who they were or are or remember anything more about it. I just remember them tripping out. And I remember they kind of stopped the song and they were like, he's like, "No, keep playing it." And the guy, being him, gave him the guitar and then he played the solo to "Shock Me." He handed him back the guitar, walked off the stage, and then we left. Because then at that point, everybody knew he was there. And we got out the back door and we got to the hotel. But just a memory I'll never forget. It was the first time I was like, that I realized, I'm like, well, I could have some fun with this guy. Like, he's not going to be some stuffy, conceited, too big for the room guy, at least not to me. And he was appreciative. One thing about Ace, from back then right till his last breath, he was appreciative, so appreciative of what I did with him and for him and how I believed in him when he didn't feel anyone did. To the point that I can tell you I have a handwritten letter from him that I still have to this day, thanking me and saying those exact words, which means the world to me. And, that was really a night that cemented our friendship and our realizing we could have some fun. And yeah, we had fun in a lot of ways on a lot of levels for a long time, but that was kind of like where, I connected with him, he connected with me on a friendship level. And it was just amazing, and suddenly I was not, it wasn't just Ace Frehley, the guitar god and the hero of mine as a kid. It was Ace Frehley, a friend. And Ace Frehley, a guy whose career was somewhat in my hands. Very recently, while Ace was going through this recent health issue, a guy named John Ostrowski, who's worked as Ace's assistant for many years, told me something that just completely moved me. I was lucky enough to sit with Ace and Peter when Kiss went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Ace insisted that I have a spot and have one of his tickets at the table with them. And so did Peter, for that matter. And John, who was working with Ace at that time, told me just the other day that they were Kiss's induction was in Brooklyn, and that John and Ace were driving to the induction in the car, and Ace said to John, "Hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you in, and if it comes down to me only being able to get one person in, that person's going to be Ed." And John's a huge fan and put a lot of work into Ace too, and John was heartbroken, obviously, and John told me that Ace looked at him, he goes to John, he goes, "Look, I appreciate you and everything, but Ed's my guy." And he said, "Without Ed Trunk, I don't have a career." What he meant was a career past Kiss, obviously. He told me that recently, and I never knew, I didn't hear that. I mean, Ace told me many times he loved me and called me brother and all that, but just hearing those things are just beyond crazy. And thankfully, John did get into the induction, and I did as well. And that's a whole nother story and a whole nother night. Sitting there waiting for Bruce Springsteen's band to stop talking so that Ace could get up and play a song with the Jam, and it never ended up happening. Ace had the guitar under his table that whole night, sitting between me and him. The guitar was right there, and Springsteen's band was inducted that year, and they talked for so long that they killed the Jam at the end of the night. Whole nother story. But, one of the many things I'll never forget about Ace was that, I can honestly say this. I always had his back. I was always there for him, and he was always there for me. But just moving through the whole time working with him, which was about 3.5, 4 years on a professional level. We then made a second record called Second Sighting, which I have executive producer credit on. Not a great record. Ace has started to, some of the same demons started creeping up. He struggled. Songs weren't there. He wasn't there. Todd plays a lot of guitar and sings a lot of the songs. The band was really pushing for it to become back to being a band. That's why that record is labeled Frehley's Comet. And, it just wasn't the follow-up that was needed, but it was very rushed. On top of Ace starting to battle some demons again, the album was very, very rushed because Ace was offered the support slot on the Iron Maiden tour. So it was not, the record should not have been made that quickly and should not have come out, but they wanted a record, Atlantic wanted a record in the marketplace for a big arena tour that Ace was going to be on, so they just rushed the record. And it shows. Even though I worked as a producer on it, I acknowledge the record's not great. Remember, that record was recorded at what was an old church in New York City called Media Sound. I remember going there and checking on the recording. I remember the band, Ace and the band, gave me a Zero Halliburton briefcase. I remember them saying to me, "Well, you're a big record executive now. You've got a hit artist. You've got to look the part with a really cool briefcase." Because I would always come in like fumbling papers or whatever. And that day they awarded me with this really nice briefcase, and they all signed the inside of it. Still have it. So that was the second sighting period. And then, there started to be problems, with him kind of not doing well and starting to worry about him and his sobriety and where things were at. And then Atlantic was like, this third record's really got to deliver. And we made a great third record with Trouble Walking. But it just kind of got away from us a little bit, and second sighting kind of turned some people off, and we lost a little bit of the real hard rock bass with some of the stuff on there. And we brought back Richie Scarlett for Trouble Walking. We brought back Eddie Kramer. It's a real good record, but it just was hard to recover, and it was going to take more than one record to kind of reinstill faith that Ace was going to be, could sell records and get on the radio. There was nothing close to a hit on either of the records. We did a live EP in there as a little bridge called Live Plus One with one or two studio tracks, if I remember. And, that was my 4 years working with Ace in a professional capacity as his A&R guy, with great stories, great memories, and, been up and down on the material. Some of the craziness ensued on the road with him, and trying to keep pulling him back in and pulling him back into a good place and what have you. I remember Ace played the Limelight in New York. Gene and Paul got up and jammed with him. They were watching what he was doing. He was watching what they were doing. Famously, Ace did a Kiss song on Trouble Walking called Hide Your Heart. I had played him the demo, thought it was going to be on the Crazy Nights record, and it wasn't. And I told Ace it would be a goof if you did this and beat them to it, and he did. I think John Regan also suggested it. Holly Knight, who's a co-writer of that song, has said publicly on more times than not that Ace's version, it's been done by a lot of people, that Ace's version is her favorite. And then Ace was dropped from the label, and the label was ultimately dropped by Atlantic. I left the label in 91. So, everything kind of spiraled off, everyone went their own ways. But I maintained contact with Ace. A lot of times when you work with people in an environment like that, when you're not working together anymore, everybody just kind of like fizzles out. Your relationship, the amount you talk, to this day, it's like that. It's like that in radio for sure. But I didn't. I stayed in touch with Ace. He was living in New York City. I would go up to his apartment in Lincoln Center. We would have parties up there. We would go to shows. We would hang out. And Ace would, tell me he had interest in continuing to make records. And he started to make records again. And on a lot of those records, he would use me as a sounding board. Because he didn't have, he had a trust with me. Much like he had this trust with Eddie Kramer. And by no means am I saying I'm Eddie Kramer, but he had this trust with Eddie Kramer going into the first record he made with me. At this point, he had established a trust with me that I was going to tell him straight what was good and what wasn't. And there was a comfort zone there. So on many of the records that Ace made since 91, whenever Trouble Walking was, 90, he would, I think I probably even have some credits on some of them. I haven't looked in a long time, but he would use me as a sounding board. He would have me listen to the material. He would ask me to suggest producers. He would show me the artwork. He was super proud of art. He was a guy that knew computers and computer graphics better than anyone I knew, earlier than anyone I knew. As a matter of fact, that letter, one of the letters he wrote to me that I still have, it has like a letterhead on it that he did on his computer. Now, you got to remember, back then, computers aren't what they are now. This was in the 80s. It was a unique thing. He was very proud of being able to do that. The backstage passes he would design on his computer. If you have the Second Sighting album, there are 2 feet turned in reverse directions in sneakers. Those are my feet. That was another thing. Again, I could give you a week of just free-flowing thought about Ace Frehley because of my experience with him. The stories just keep firing. But those feet in Second Sighting in the inside sleeve are my feet. And that's a crazy story where I was at the recording of that record and I was checking on it, seeing how things were going. And I was standing while Ace had the guitar in his lap doing a solo, and he stopped doing the solo and he looks at me, and I had one foot going out to the right and the other foot going forward. It was just the way I was standing. And he looks at me, he's like, that don't hurt your feet to do that? I go, what do you mean? Yeah, your foot's turned, kind of fucked up. And I go, no, that's nothing. I go, I can turn my foot any way I want. And I took my foot I didn't even know what double jointed was. And I didn't know that everybody couldn't do this, but I turned my foot around, one foot, so it faced behind me and one foot going forward. Yeah, I guess I have some sort of double joint or flexibility that most people don't have. To this day, I don't really understand it. I haven't tried to do it in a while. I don't know if I could. But Ace lost his mind when he saw me do that. Put the guitar in. Holy fuck. He started calling the band in from the control room. Do it again. Do it again. Do the foot thing. Do the foot thing. I'm like, Ace, it's not a big deal. Yeah, it is. No, I would do it, and he would just howl and cackle and go crazy. And I just am standing there like, you mean you can't do this? He goes, nobody else can do that. That's fucking insane. So he pulls out his camera, which was a Polaroid camera at the time, and he's making me do it, and he's firing off Polaroids. And, waving them in the air so that they would develop. And he goes, I'm going to digitize this. I go, what? My computer, I'm going to digitize. I go, all right, Ace, do whatever you want. Just make a good record. And then the record comes out, and, he took that photo, and he, made it colorful and put some markings on it and ran it through a computer basically in 1987, 88. And to this day, if you have that record, those are my feet. And what happened was it became a thing because that record came out, and in interviews, people said to Ace, why are there 2 feet going opposite directions on the inside sleeve of your record? And if you know anything about Ace, he had a wacky sense of humor. And Ace would say, that's my label guy. That's my friend Ed Trunk. He can fucking do that in real life. I took the picture, I digitized. And the interviewers would be like, what? Hey, you got to see he can do it. If he was here, I'd show you. So he would tell me all the time. He goes, people are asking about your feet. So he got booked on Second Sighting to go on MTV. I don't remember if it was Headbangers Ball or just a guest DJ segment. Remember, he did it with Todd. And I went, I was his label guy. I was with him all the time. I went to MTV's taping with him, and I'm standing in the wings of the stage, and he says to me, he's doing the host segments with Todd, and he holds up his record. This is my new record, Second Sighting. And he pulls out the inside sleeve and shows the photo of the feet. He goes, and this is Ed Trunk's feet. He goes, Ed, come out here. He waves me out. Do the foot thing for the MTV. Do the foot thing on the camera. It's probably on YouTube. It aired. There I am in 1988 on MTV and on camera, turning my one foot behind the other. And there he is, cackling and howling his ass off, just like he did the first time I did it. So then when I did it on MTV, then it really became a thing. Because everywhere I went with Ace, either he would say, hey, do the foot thing, do the fucking foot thing. Or fans at the shows in the audience would recognize me because I was on MTV with them and they knew it was my feet. Hey, you're the guy. Hey, can you do the foot thing like the inside of the jacket? I must have done it 1,000 times. To the point that it started to hurt. My knee started to hurt. It was bad. I said, stop making me do this. It's bad. It's people, it's hurting my leg. He loved it. Todd Howard used to always go, Eddie and the foot thing, Eddie and the foot thing, Eddie do the foot thing. Became my thing. It just hit me now. Anyway, going forward, he would make records. He would go on to various different record deals, record situations, record labels. And, he would often call me, hey, come to the studio, listen to this, tell me what you think, tell me what you think I should do. Anybody out there I should be talking to as a producer, any other songwriters I should try working with. And I would always give him input. I never had anything to do with Ace's business on any level outside of the Megaforce years. And some of that was by design, if I'm being honest, because, there were a lot of deals that went sideways and a lot of crazy stories and what have you. And I didn't want to, I saw a lot of people that got in business with Ace that their friendships fell apart. And I did not want that to happen. So after officially working with him on the label end, I truly believe we maintained a friendship for decades because I never got involved in his business. I would be there for him. I would give him input when he asked, but I never was on the payroll. I never took a penny. I never asked for money. It was very, very much just helping a friend out. And our friendship, went from there. He came to my wedding, 2002. That's a funny story because he said to me, are going to be any other rock stars there? And I said, yeah, my friends in Anthrax are coming and my friends in Overkill are coming. And those guys. He's like, put me at a table. I want to come in low key. I want to stay out of the spotlight. I want to blend in. I said, Ace, if you're going to be uncomfortable, you're worried about people beating on you. I said, I can't account for that. I said, but I'll do my best. I said, but, people go to a wedding, they get a guest. You don't know who the guest is. They could be not well behaved, I said, I'll do my best. I said, but do me a favor. I said, get there early before the cocktail hour so I could get you set. You're not making some grand entrance and I'll just kind of hope to blend you in. And then I'll sit you with the Anthrax guys and you guys can all kind of hang in the corner. I'll put a table over in the corner, out of the main thing, and you should be fine. So I'm not going to broadcast that you're coming to the people, but I can't account for what might happen. He's all right, that's good. That's good. So told him to get there, told him when the cocktail hour started. I told him when to get there. And he says, whatever it was, 6:00. I say, Ace, get there at 6. Don't get there later than 6. Get there a little before 6. I'll get you in ahead of everybody. Cocktail hour, 6 to 7, no Ace. Now it's 7:15. And they're doing the whole bridal party introductions. Still no Ace. I'm looking at the corner of my eye. I'm seeing the two places at the table where he's supposed to be sitting, just empty chairs. I'm like, oh my God. He's going to pull a no-show. in the middle of the first dance, when the whole wedding party is staring at the bride and groom dancing. The door, all the introductions are done, the doors are closed. You hear, I can't get in. I can't. Open the fucking door. 300 people turn their head and look at the door. Through the door, stumbling through, is a guy in the loudest pinstripe suit you ever saw, with a giant video camera on his shoulder. Fucking Ed, I made it. The only thing that would have made it less low key would be a smoke bomb going off when he walked in. Ace, what? Fucking traffic. I got jammed up. I go, oh, I can't help you with the blend in part now, man. 300 people are looking at you. He was a good sport about it. Took a ton of photos and it was endless, man. You guys, it was endless. Endless good times. Went bowling with them. You know, look, I said many times, I am so happy and was so happy and proud for Ace that he finally got sober. And he was very happy about it too. He often talked about it on the air with us. But I will say this. He was a fun guy to party and drink with. So although I never, of course, encouraged him to try to drink again or wanted that to happen because it was a nightmare when he did, there were times I did miss tipping a few with him because we would laugh and we had times. You know, I took him bowling to my local bowling alley. We both got hammered. And I turn around I said, Ace, we drank before we went in there. I go, Ace, sit here at the lane. I'm going to get us bowling shoes. I don't need no fucking shoes. I go, you need shoes to bowl. They're special shoes. Just wait here. Let me go get the bowling shoes. I'm getting the bowling shoes. The guy is looking over my shoulder in horror at the lane I just came up from. I go, what's wrong? He goes, are you on lane 22? I go, yeah. He goes, there's a guy bowling already. I turn around. There's Ace with the bowling ball above his head, throwing it like you would throw an overhead pass in a basketball game, chucking bowling balls airborne halfway down the bowling lane, bouncing, ba-boom, ba-boom, bouncing into other lanes. I go running over there. Ace, what are you doing? I'm here to bowl. I'm bowling. Then I go running back to the guy where the shoes are. The guy's on the phone. I said, what are you doing? I need shoes. He goes, I'm calling the cops. That guy's out of control. I go, you can't call the cops. Do you know how that is? He goes, no, I don't care who it is. Who is it? I said, it's Ace Frehley from KISS. Takes the phone away from his ear. He's looking. He goes, holy shit. Because we were in a bowling alley in New Jersey, in my hometown. Didn't expect to see Ace in there. He goes, holy shit. I go, do me a favor, man. I'll get out of here. I'll get him out of here. I said, just don't call the cops, man. He's just had a few too many. He goes, you bring him up here, have him sign a couple bowling pins for me, and I'm not going to call the cops. So I go grab Ace literally by his jacket. It was like something out of a movie. I go, come on, sign these. Signs the bowling pins. I go, get the fuck out of here. Got out of there. He slept over in my house that night. That all started because he ended up being by my house because he came to pick up a Cadillac. I think I'm by your house. As soon as he came over, he hit the bar. Again, these were the drinking days. So much fun, but not good for him. but led to amazing stories like that one, and totally true stories. And they are endless, endless, endless stories that I have. I'm going to take a break, songs from Ace or something along those lines, but I think probably best if we save that for a show when I have you guys call in. I know we're going to do a lot of that, and at some point we'll do that. We're going to be obviously celebrating and remembering Ace for a long time. So I don't know if I'm going to have time to do, I did put a top 10 together. I don't know if I'll have time to do that in today's show. Obviously, this is extraordinarily hard for me, and I'm just trying to power through and do something appropriate. And, I've got a unique position to have known this man so well and have had him be such a big part of my life for most of it. So I, just working off the cuff here. And again, as I said before, I know throughout my life, whenever I have met people, they've always asked me to tell them Ace stories. And I love doing that. And I thought that would be the best way to celebrate and remember him today, as I'm going to need some time to process all of this. And it's not easy, not easy for I'm sure it's not easy for all of you, even if you didn't know him, if you were just a fan. And for me, it's a whole nother level. But really, just a quick couple other remembrances. I talked about what I call the partying years for Ace, and I remember VH1 had done a show called Rock Honors, and I believe that it was done in Vegas at the Mandalay Bay, and I believe the year was probably around probably around 06, probably around 2006, the first Rock Honors. And they had hired me to be a producer on it. And one of my jobs was to work on the tribute to Kiss. The way that show worked is it was like the actual Kiss would play, and then a band would play in tribute to them. Def Leppard band played in tribute to them. Godsmack played in tribute to Judas Priest. All American Rejects played in tribute to Def Leppard. For Kiss, the tribute band ended up including an original member of the band, and that was Ace. Because at that point, Kiss was constituted with Tommy Thayer in Ace's costume and Eric Singer in Peter Criss's costume. And needless to say, I'm not going to go down that whole world right now, but that was obviously a very, very hard thing for Ace. And Kiss refused to let Ace play with them at this Rock Honors. Rock Honors was like an attempt of VH1 to try to do their own Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And we made an appeal to Gene and Paul to let Ace play a song with them, and they weren't having it. But VH1 thought, they were going to honor Ace and Peter, and they wanted them there. Well, Peter flat out declined to come because he said if he couldn't play, he wasn't going to stand there and be there. So there was no getting him there. He wouldn't do it. Ace agreed to come, but felt weird about it and wanted to play. So I made the suggestion that we put together an all-star tribute to Kiss, and he be the surprise guest that comes out and jams. So the surprise band, the tribute to Kiss band, was Rob Zombie, Scott Ian, Gilby Clarke, who was doing that show Rockstar at the time, and Tommy Lee and Slash on guitar, and Tommy Lee on drums. And I made the suggestion that they do God of Thunder because Rob Zombie had covered it with White Zombie. And everyone agreed that would be good. So they rehearsed, and then they we all agreed Ace would walk out during the song and play the solo. I don't remember if it was that song or a different one, but Ace would come out as a surprise. So Ace was actually in the tribute band to the band he was being honored for being a founding member of. It was a very tough spot for him, but I talked him into it because I said, look, because Ace is like, how am I supposed to answer people and tell people why I'm not playing in my own band? I go, let them answer those questions. You come out, be the big surprise, be the hero, and take the high road. Let them explain it. Let them explain why they wouldn't play with you. And that's exactly what happened. But the night before, there was a party at the House of Blues in the Mandalay Bay, up in the foundation room. And I remember, this was early in Ace trying to get sober. And I remember before we flew him out for that thing, I said to him, hey, are you going to be able to, is this a good spot for you? Being in Vegas, being around Slash, who at that time was not sober. I don't want you falling off the wagon. Nothing's more important than you staying sober. He's saying, I'll be fine. So we get out there. Night before, there's a party at the Foundations room. And I'm sitting on a sofa with Slash. Ace had disappeared for a little bit. And Slash and I are having a drink and we're talking about the event. And as I'm talking to Slash and he's looking at me, I remember him look up out the corner of his eye and kind of his eyes dart over to the dance floor. And he looks back at me and he goes, I'll never forget this. He goes, hey. I go, what? He goes, keep an eye on your boy. We're going to need him tomorrow. I said, what are you talking about? He motions with his head. There was Ace on the dance floor with a girl under each arm and a drink in each hand. Ah, what's up, brother? I was like, oh my God, I'm fired. Because he was my responsibility for that thing, and that whole tribute band was my thing. Got a great picture of all of us from there. And I grabbed him, brought him back to his room, put him in the room, said, get your shit together. You can't blow this tomorrow. And then the next day, the day of the taping of the event, I'm down in the hallway of the Mandalay Bay Event Center, and Ace is a no-show, and everyone is freaking out. So I grab a phone, I call his room, he answers. I go, what are you doing? He's like, I can't do it, brother. I go, what do you mean? He goes, I can't go down there. I can't see Kiss with someone else in my costume and stand there. I can't do it. I said, Ace, you got to do it. You'll be the bigger guy. You'll put the pressure on them. You got to do it. People are expecting you. You're going to steal the show. I had to pump them up. I go, you got to do it for me. I said, I could lose my gig here, man. You got to come on. You got to come through. I said, and if you don't do it, you're going to play into the narrative of everybody saying you're unreliable and you can't do it anymore. All right, brother, I'll do it for you. I'll suck it up. He didn't not want to come down because he had gotten drunk the night before. He just didn't know how to process seeing his band without him in it with somebody impersonating him. Let's be honest. But not the first time of many times where he said, I'll do it for you. And he did it. And if you saw the show, he came out and he did great. And he ended up seeing Gene and Paul and he took a photo. To this day, if you see a photo of Ace out of makeup with Gene and Paul in makeup, that's where that photo is from. I have a great photo of all of us from there too. Not with Kiss, but me with the tribute act. I also have one of my favorite photos of all time that Mark Weiss took when I took Ace to see this new band that I knew from New Jersey called Skid Row. Those guys tripped out that I had signed a new Ace. I put them on the phone with him, with those guys from the Atlantic Records 40th party. And then I took Ace to go see Skid Row open for Bon Jovi. We got a limo. We went to the show, and Ace ended up jamming with them that night doing Cold Gin. And I got a photo of all of us backstage. That's just one of my favorite photos ever. And then Skid Row ended up singing on Trouble Walkin'. They do backing vocals on that record because they're such obviously huge Ace Kiss fans. But one other thing that I'll never forget too was when we had Ace on That Metal Show. And look, you guys that listen to this radio show, you know Ace's appearances on here over the years. From the threat against, when Paul said something about him on Stern and Ace threatening to drop the nuclear bomb on my show, and I talked him out of it, and it's just endless stories, and the stuff that's happened just on these airwaves alone, on this exact show alone. But I remember having him on That Metal Show, and you guys may remember this if you watch the old show. The smoking flute. I had no idea he was going to do that. He busts out a flute and starts playing it with smoke coming out the end. And I go, what the hell is that? This all happened in the show. I did the smoking guitar. It's my smoking flute. And I remember being a wise ass and saying, so is Tommy Thayer going to start doing that too now? Which, he loved and, of course, got me hate from whatever. It's funny. Again, just things just firing into my mind of just endless, crazy, funny stories. But, I want to talk for a minute before I'm out of time about a theme between Ace and I. And that really was, he was always there for me, and I was always there for him. When Kiss reunited with the original band, massive tour in the mid-90s, he didn't forget about me. Invited me to the shows, sent me laminates so I could go to any show I wanted, sit in his dressing room. Didn't matter if Gene or Paul liked it, you're coming, you're with me. Stuff I will never forget. When I had my 30th year in radio party, which was at the Hard Rock in Times Square, Ace came and played with Peter Criss. I believe might be the last or second to last time that they played together. Ace and Peter, for that matter, did that for me. Of course, when I did the 40th 2 years ago, Ace played for me, which will come out and you will see it. And he was great. It's endless. When I called on him, he was there. When I put together New York Steel, the 9/11 fundraiser in New York City in 2001, I originally had Ace as my headliner. And at that point, because of what was happening with 9/11 and people not coming to New York City, the people I was working with on that said, you're going to need a bigger act at the headline. You're going to need somebody to headline and close this to sell tickets. That has not been seen. Ace has been out there for a bit. You need another act. So I went and reunited Twisted Sister. And that's how the event ended up coming off. But Ace was originally going to be the headliner. Back in the New York groove, New York City. And it was a tough phone call when I had to call him and say, hey, listen, buddy, you're going to be second from the top now. And he was besides himself. He's like, who else could possibly headline this? What are you talking about? And I said, well, I need a band that hadn't been seen for a while. Twisted Sister hasn't played in 13 years. They're going to close. Why are you talking about? I was in Kiss. Twisted Sister was never that big. So I let him spout off for a little bit. I go, Ace, I get it, but I need you on this. I need you to do this for me. I need it to be this way to happen. And he just took a beat, took a breath, took a beat. All right, brother, I'll do it for you. And he did. And like I said, and just more recently, my documentary currently being filmed. I said, will you do it? He said, yeah. He goes, why don't you come out to the house? You come to the studio, you walk in, you could film walking in, you could film in my house, film holding my gold records, whatever you want to do. And when that documentary comes out, you will see that. So I have a couple things with Ace that have not been seen yet. The footage we shot for my doc and the concert performance for my 40th 2 years ago. I also have, right after that metal show ended, I was looking for ideas for a new show. I shot a pilot for a one-on-one interview show at the Iridium in New York City. The show was going to be called Inside Out with Eddie Trunk. I needed somebody to be the test subject. I needed somebody to be the guest. Called Ace. Got this idea. Trying to do this show. Will you come into New York City? Will you come to Iridium? Will you bring your guitar? Will you sit there with me for 2 hours and let me interview you and shoot it and see if I can get a new TV show? He did it. He was great. By the way, I have no idea where that pilot is. I got to track it down one of these days. I was working with an agent. I don't know where that footage went. The show did not get picked up. Interview shows are tough to sell, even pre-YouTube era. But it was great. And Ace told great stories and played riffs as I threw songs out to him. It was all pro shot. I've got to find that footage. I don't know if Iridium has it. I don't know where it is. But it needs to be seen. Just hitting me now. It was really good. People would love to see that. I remember I got in an argument with him, fun argument, because one of my questions to him was, hey, how did you come up with the guitar solo in the live version of Rock and Roll All Night? I said, because there's not a guitar solo in the studio version of that song. So I said, how did you come up with it for Kiss Alive? And he looked at me and goes, there's a guitar solo in the studio version. I go, no, there's not. And I was in a fucking band. There's a guitar solo. I go, no, Ace, there is no guitar solo in the studio version of Rock and Roll All Night. He argued with me about it. It was not the first time that I knew his music and his catalog and his career better than he did. That happened all the time, where he would be doing an interview or a print interview, and he would call me and be like, did I play on a song called Torpedo Girl? Yeah, Ace, you did. It's on Unmasked. I don't remember that record. Yeah, it's a kind of pop record, It's, all right. So I say, yeah. Back in the days when you used to fax interviews in to people, there are a few interviews out there that you might have read back in the late 80s that you thought were with Ace that I was answering the questions because he was like, do this for me. You know better than I do. He would often ask me Kiss questions that he didn't remember. I jammed up. I forgot, buddy. Come on, girlie, help me out. When he wrote his book, I gave him the fish sandwich story. Oh my God, I forgot to tell that story on the air. I remember that being in the book, the fish sandwich, when I revived him with a McDonald's fish sandwich when he was out of it in the back of a limo. We were doing interviews. I need a fucking fish sandwich. Just endless. Just endless. Well, my memories and stories and love of Ace are endless and will be endless. But this radio show is not endless, and we are coming up on the end of the program. Again, this was a show that I wish like hell I did not have to do. Ace Frehley was a gargantuan monster influence on so many guitar players, a monster talent who rocked and played and created new music and performed live right till his last breath. Always creating, always making new music, always playing right to the end. A true rock star, rock warrior in every possible sense of the word. The life he lived, the good, the bad, the ups, the downs. He lived a life.